Good morning. It's good to be with you. This morning I want to talk to you about the baptism of the Holy Spirit. In all four Gospels, we are told that John the Baptist said to those he was baptizing, "I'm baptizing you with water, but there's one coming after me who will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire." And that was fulfilled on the day of Pentecost. We read about that in the second chapter of the book of Acts. Before I read the passage, I just want to point out that the word baptize has got the meaning of flooding, drowning, overwhelming. So to be baptized in the Holy Spirit is to be flooded with the Holy Spirit. Jesus had said to his disciples when he appeared to them after he'd risen from the dead, "Wait in Jerusalem till you are clothed with power from above." They probably wanted to rush off and tell everybody that he'd risen from the dead. But he said, "No, wait. You need power. You need my strength, the strength of the Holy Spirit." And on the day of Pentecost, this great feast, which saw visitors arrive in Jerusalem from every country in the world, we see this momentous event happening. I'm reading from the second chapter of the book of Acts. When the day of Pentecost was being celebrated, all of them were together in one place. Suddenly a sound like the roar of a mighty windstorm came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw tongues like flames of fire that separated, and one rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them that ability. You will see that there are three physical things that happen. First of all, there's the sound of a rushing wind. And then there are the tongues of what look like fire resting on the heads of each one of them. And each one of them begins to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. These three phenomena, I've never seen fire coming down and resting on somebody's head. I have 2 or 3 times had people say to me that they had experienced the breeze or the wind of the Holy Spirit blowing on their faces. And I'll talk about that in the second video. But this other phenomena of speaking in other languages does happen today. There were visitors from every nation staying in Jerusalem. When that sound came, a crowd quickly gathered, startled because each one of them heard the disciples speaking in his own language. Now, these visitors to Jerusalem were Jews. And of course they spoke the common language of the Roman Empire, which was Greek, and they probably also spoke Aramaic, which is the language that would have been Jesus's first language. But they also spoke the language of the country they lived in this far-flung corners of the Roman Empire. I want to give you a modern parallel. My grandmother was born and grew up in India. And my grandmother of course, spoke English because she was English, but she also spoke Hindustani, or Hindi as it's called now. I live in South Africa. Of course I speak English. My father was born in London, but I also speak some Afrikaans. I taught 2 pupils in England, one from Kenya, one from Natal. Of course, they spoke English, but the girl from Kenya spoke fluent Swahili as well, and the boy from Natal spoke Zulu. It would be like us going to London, the 4 of us, and hearing people who've never left London, Cockneys, praising God in Hindi, Afrikaans, Swahili, and Zulu. We would be saying, "What's going on?" And this is what you see happening. I'll read on from the book of Acts chapter 2. Stunned and amazed, they asked, all of these people who are speaking are Galileans, aren't they? So how is it that each one of us hears them speaking in his own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, the district of Libya near Cyrene, Jewish and proselyte visitors from Rome, Cretans and Arabs, listening to them talk in our own languages about the great deeds of God. All of them continued to be stunned and puzzled, and they kept asking one another, what can this mean? But others kept saying in derision, they're drunk on sweet wine. And Peter gets up and says, no, they're not. The pubs aren't open. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. How can they be drunk? These followers of Jesus are being given this mighty power of the Holy Spirit. Peter, you will remember, was so confident about his own strength. He told Jesus that he would go to prison with him. He'd even die with him. And Jesus said to him, you've got it all backwards. You're going to say that you don't even know me. 3 times you will deny me. And you remember in the courtyard when Jesus was being humiliated by the Roman soldiers, and Peter was there in the courtyard, and 3 times he was accused of being a follower of Jesus, once by a servant girl, and he denied Jesus 3 times. And Jesus, when the cock crew the 2nd time, he turned and he looked at Peter, and I think it was with a look of compassion. And Peter suddenly realized what he'd done, and he went out and wept like a small child. He was so confident in his own strength, but that confidence was completely broken. On the day of Pentecost, when he's filled with God's power, far from being frightened off by a servant girl, he gets up in front of thousands of people, and he says to them, men of Judea and everyone living in or staying in Jerusalem, you must understand something, so pay close attention. These men are not drunk, as you suppose, for it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. Rather, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on everyone. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. In those days I will even pour out my spirit on my slaves, men and women alike, and they will prophesy. Before this, the Holy Spirit was only given to particular people for a particular task. But now, the Holy Spirit is poured out on all flesh. Of course, when the Bible talks about the last days, it's talking about the time from Jesus' resurrection to the present. So of course we're living in the last days, and God just wants to empower every single follower of his, because we need to be strong. Peter, instead of being scared off, now gets up and fearlessly delivers the message of the gospel. And so each one of us can be empowered in this way. And of course, we need that power and that strength to spread the good news. I have not seen flames on anyone's head. I've twice had people speak to me, in fact 2 or 3 times. I remember a girl we were praying with in England, my wife and I. As we prayed for her, she kept saying that there was, she said, where's this wind coming from? And we said, what wind? We couldn't feel any wind. We were in a study with the doors all shut, but she felt it. I had pupils at St. John's College say, when I was telling this story in class, I'd prayed with 3 or 4 of them the night before. They said, but didn't you feel the wind when you were praying with us? And I said, no, I've never felt it. I think the most special time was when my wife, who had very bad cancer, was being prayed with in Port Elizabeth. She said, have they left the doors open? Because Port Elizabeth's very windy. Oh, first she said, have they turned the fans on in the church? I said, no, there are no fans and the doors are shut. She said, why are they breathing on me or blowing on me? She thought this was a new prayer technique and she thought it was very unhygienic. I said, nobody's blowing on you. And then we realized it was the wind of the Holy Spirit. But this third gift, the gift of speaking in other languages, is very common today. And I want to talk about that in the next video clip. But in the meantime, you can possibly have a discussion with your teacher as to about what you've heard. I'll see you in the next video clip. Bless you.